All right, let's dive into Metro Awakening. This VR game has been getting a lot of attention. We've got reviews and official descriptions, so we'll try to figure out what makes it tick, and does it live up to the hype? Picture yourself stuck in a Moscow metro tunnel. The air is thick with tension. Danger could be around every corner. That's Metro Awakening.
The setting is what grabs you first. It's 2028 after a nuclear apocalypse. Humanity is barely surviving in the Moscow metro. This isn't just another Metro game, though. Metro Awakening is a prequel. We get the origin story of a character from Dmitry Glukhovsky's original Metro series.
So a strong setting and a prequel story. But what about the VR experience? What's that like?
Reviewers are pretty much all saying the atmosphere is super immersive. They talk about wiping condensation off their virtual gas masks, feeling the weight of their gear, even cranking a generator to power their flickering torch. Seems like the devs put a lot of work into making the Metro feel heavy and oppressive. I bet that makes every encounter even more intense.
That's what I'm really interested in. I'm a huge Metro fan, and those tense, claustrophobic environments are what make the series so good. So how does the game handle those classic Metro tunnel shootouts in VR?
That seems to be one of the game's strengths. Reviewers say the shootouts feel intense and real, like a physical experience. One reviewer even talked about the feeling of reloading a rusty AK-47 behind cover, knowing your life depends on it.
That makes sense. That kind of frantic gunplay where you have to use your hands seems perfect for VR. What about the monsters? Are those encounters as impactful in VR?
Absolutely. They're a highlight, especially the first one. It's designed to stick with you. They talk about feeling vulnerable and terrified when facing these creatures in the dark. Shows you how well the devs use VR to bring out those primal fears.
Sounds like they nailed the immersive atmosphere and intense combat that Metro is known for. But no game is perfect, right? What are some of the limitations reviewers have pointed out? What didn't work so well in VR?
Well, this is where it gets complicated. The game wants to be a thrilling VR shooter, but it also wants to tell a complex story with lots of lore. Reviewers felt like that created some problems.
That's interesting. Storytelling in VR, how to do it right. What specifically didn't work?
It sounds like the story relies a lot on monologues and radio conversations. That doesn't work well in VR. Players expect something more interactive and immersive.
So they tried to force old storytelling into VR.
You could say that. It's a missed opportunity, really. There are so many creative ways to tell stories in VR. Imagine if the conversations were in VR. You could interact with characters, see their expressions. That would add so much depth.
You're right. And how about stealth? Was that as good as the combat?
Not really. Reviews say the stealth feels clunky and underutilized, like it was an afterthought.
Clunky in VR, huh? What's the problem? Controls.
The controls for stealth takedowns were especially fiddly, it seems. You need smooth controls in those situations, but it sounds like they weren't. It felt like fighting the game instead of executing a takedown.
It's a shame. They could have created those moments where you're sneaking through shadows, using your virtual hands to take down enemies, feeling like a predator. It's frustrating when a game has potential for immersive stealth, but misses the mark.
Yeah, that's the general consensus. Bad controls plus boring level design in the stealth sections held it back.
So we've talked about the good and the bad. What's the final verdict?
Reviewers agree Metro Awakening gives you an intense, atmospheric VR experience, captures the feeling of the Metro universe. The gunfights and monster encounters are immersive and well-made. But they also point out problems with the story and the clunky stealth mechanics. They say the game doesn't live up to its full potential. One reviewer said it well. Those early gunfights feel incredible, but the lack of variety thins out the reward over time. It sounds like Metro Awakening starts strong, but doesn't quite keep that momentum going.
That's too bad, especially for a game with such a cool concept. Anything else that holds it back? Besides the story and the stealth, I mean.
Yeah, one more big criticism. Repetition. It seems like the game doesn't offer enough variety, you know? The environments, the gameplay. It gets old.
That's a bummer. The Metro world has so much you could explore. I can imagine those same tunnels and enemies getting tiring after a while. Did they try to do anything to mix it up?
It doesn't seem like it. There's so much potential in the Metro world. They could have added more verticality, different paths, hidden areas. Again, create a sense of discovery. Like imagine stumbling on a hidden black market deep in the Metro, or a secret bunker with old artifacts.
Right. That's what makes exploration fun. And in VR, where immersion is so important, that seems like a missed opportunity.
Exactly. A repetitive environment can really ruin the immersion. You start to feel like you're just going through the motions, not really progressing or discovering anything new.
So Metro Awakening is kind of a warning then. Even with amazing graphics and VR tech, A game can still be a letdown if it's not varied and deep enough.
Good point. It shows how important level design is, even in VR. The world needs to be more than just pretty. It needs to offer a sense of discovery, something to keep players engaged over time.
You mentioned resource management. That's a big part of the Metro games. How does that work in VR?
That's actually where the VR really shines. Imagine physically checking your gas mask, making sure you have filters. That feeling when you realize you're running low on air. VR is great at creating those kind of intense in-the-moment experiences.
It's like those scenes in horror movies where the characters are trapped and their supplies are running out. VR could make that even scarier and more immersive.
Exactly. And it's not just about being scared. Managing your resources in VR can be really satisfying too. Imagine carefully searching for supplies, organizing your inventory, feeling relieved when you find that extra gas mask filter just in time.
Every action matters. Every decision feels important. It's about surviving against the odds.
Exactly. And that's something that Metro Awakening, even with its problems, seems to do well. It makes you think strategically, prioritize, and adapt to a changing environment.
So for our listeners who are into survival horror, this could be a reason to try Metro Awakening, even if the story isn't perfect.
Definitely. If you like tension, resourcefulness, and a constant feeling of danger, this game is for you.
We've talked about a lot, the atmosphere, the ending.
We've looked at the good and the bad, the things it does well and the things it doesn't, and how it might influence future VR games.
I think we can say that Metro Awakening will make people talk, whether they like it or not.
It's a bold attempt to bring the Metro universe into VR, and it shows that VR gaming is still evolving with lots of potential.
So for those who are new to VR, is Metro Awakening a good place to start? Or should they try something simpler first?
That's a good question. Metro Awakening has good things about it, but I wouldn't recommend it as your first VR game. It's super intense, both the atmosphere and the gameplay. It just throws you in without much help.
Not for beginners, then.
Right. You need some experience with VR controls and how it all works. It could be overwhelming for someone new, especially with all the resource management and survival stuff.
So you're saying try a simpler VR game first, like a shooter or a puzzle game.
Exactly. Get used to the controls and the whole VR experience before jumping into something as demanding as Metro Awakening.
Good advice. Start slow and find what you like before going all in. So for experienced VR gamers who are up for a challenge, what are the key takeaways here?
Metro Awakening is a mixed bag. It gives you an immersive, intense VR experience that feels like the Metro universe. But the story, the clunky stealth, and the repetition hold it back.
So it's got strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. Fans of Metro will probably like it, but it's not the revolutionary VR experience some people were hoping for.
It shows that VR game development is still figuring things out, right?
Yeah, there's innovation, but also growing pains. Metro Awakening shows both the potential and the challenges of making a truly great VR game.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit and talk about the bigger picture. VR gaming is still pretty new, and there's a lot of cool stuff happening.
Totally. It's an exciting time for VR. Developers are pushing the limits, trying new ways to tell stories, create immersive worlds, and make games more engaging.
What are you seeing in VR development? What areas do you think VR can really change things up?
One big trend is making storytelling in VR more interactive and engaging. No more just watching cutscenes and listening to dialogue. They want to make the player a part of the story.
Makes sense. In VR, you're not just watching the story, you're in it. So the way they tell the story needs to be immersive too.
Right. Instead of monologues and cutscenes, they're using things like environmental storytelling, dialogues you can participate in, and even stories that change based on your choices.
Wow, that's interesting. It sounds like VR could completely change how we experience stories.
It could. And it's not just about stories. VR also opens up a ton of possibilities for designing environments and creating worlds.
Also,
Well, in VR, you're not stuck with a flat screen. You can build massive, immersive worlds that players can explore from every angle. You can play around with scale, verticality, even physics to create experiences you couldn't have in a regular game.
sounds like VR gives developers a whole new set of tools to create amazing, memorable experiences.
Exactly. And we're only just beginning to see what VR can really do.
Let's bring it back to Metro Awakening. Even with its problems, the game shows some of what VR can do.
It does. The gunplay, the way you interact with the world, the tension, these all show what VR is good at.
So even if Metro Awakening isn't perfect, It's still important for how VR games are developing.
For sure. It's a step in the right direction, and it'll be interesting to see what developers learn from it, both the good and the bad.
Okay, we've covered a lot in our deep dive into Metro Awakening, from the atmosphere to the ending, the good and the bad, and its place in VR gaming.
It's been an interesting journey, and hopefully we've given listeners a better idea of what this game is all about.
All right, Coaster Fanatics, you ready to dive into Planet Coaster 2?
I'm ready, let's do it.
I think we all remember that first Planet Coaster, right? It was such a hit, building those insane theme parks, so detailed.
Yeah, the level of customization was amazing.
Exactly. So now the big question is, does Planet Coaster 2 live up to all the hype?
That's what we're here to find out.
Exactly. We've got some juicy marketing material, and we've also got a review from a real player.
Nice. Always good to compare those, the promises versus the reality.
Exactly. So let's start with what Planet Coaster 2 is promising us. First up, the customization. It looks absolutely wild.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like shaping the terrain, making all these intricate paths,
Hmm.
and they're really pushing the detail on every single ride.
So even more control than the first one. That's impressive.
Yeah, it seems like it. Like you want a ghost train with glowing skulls and cobwebs? Done.
Huh. The detail in the first one was already so good. It'll be interesting to see how they've pushed it further.
And get this, water rides. Yeah. Pools, flumes, even water coasters.
Wow. So you can
Yeah.
build like a full-blown water park now.
Looks like it. Imagine the possibilities, right? Like a pirate-themed coaster that goes plunging into a volcano.
That's pretty cool. And it adds a whole new layer to the gameplay too, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about water flow and how it affects, the coasters and everything.
Right, it's not just visuals. And to make things even more dramatic, they've added this thing called an event sequencer.
What's that?
It's basically a way to choreograph events, like a firework display or synchronized light shows. Maybe even have animatronic characters come to life.
Oh, that's interesting. So you can really create these big dramatic moments like in a real theme park.
Exactly. Think about the storytelling possibilities there.
Yeah, you could have like a spooky pirate pop out during the log flume ride right before the big drop.
Oh, man. And for those who love playing with friends, they've also really ramped up the social features.
Okay, like what?
So there's cross-platform building, a shared franchise mode, and you can even visit other players' parks.
Oh, wow. So you could be playing with someone like across the world.
Yeah. Imagine checking out a park that someone in, I don't know, Japan built.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It really makes it feel more like a community.
Right. It's like a virtual theme park expo.
Yeah.
So the marketing is painting a pretty amazing picture so far.
Yeah, it does. But now it's time to hear from someone who's actually played the game.
Exactly. And the review we've got here, well, let's just say it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. The reviewer praised Planet Coaster 2 for being even better than the original in a lot of ways.
Whoa.
But
What?
they found the management side to be lacking.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Theme park sims always need to find that balance between the creative stuff and the actual management, right?
Exactly. And it sounds like Planet Coaster 2 might have tipped the scales a little too far.
Okay, well, let's dig in. What did the reviewer actually have to say?
So let's break down this review. The good news is, all that customization stuff we talked about, the reviewer said it's as good as it sounds.
Oh, good.
Yeah, like they were blown away by how much control you have, especially with the coaster editor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Apparently they made it even better, really easy to use.
That's awesome. Especially for anyone who's new to these kinds of games. You don't want to get bogged down in, a complicated editor.
Exactly. And that sandbox mode we talked about?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reviewer called it a creative haven. Just build whatever you want, no limits.
I can see why they'd love that. Just pure creation.
Oh, and those water rides.
Yeah.
Big thumbs up. The reviewer said they add a whole new dimension to the game.
Nice. So it sounds like Planet Coaster 2 is really building on what the first one did well.
It does. But now for the not-so-good news.
Or hit me.
The management side of things, it's rough.
Oh, no.
Yeah, apparently it's way too easy. Like, even on the hardest difficulty,
Yep.
the reviewer said you just make money hand over fist.
Really? That's a shame.
I know, right? Like, where's the challenge?
Yeah, if it's too easy, it gets boring fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just the money that's a problem.
What else?
Staff management. The reviewer had some real issues with it, especially when it came to, like, ride maintenance.
Oh.
Yeah, they said it was buggy. Mechanics would just ignore broken rides.
Oh, come on. That's so frustrating.
Right. Imagine you're waiting in line for the biggest coaster in the park, and it just breaks down,
Huh.
and nobody fixes it.
Ugh. Yeah. That's not fun.
And on top of that, the in-game tutorials are apparently not very helpful.
Really?
Yeah. Seems like they're assuming everyone's already played the first Planet Coaster.
Well, that's no good. A good tutorial is so important, especially for a game this
I
complex.
know. Like, how are new players supposed to learn the ropes?
Exactly. It's a big missed opportunity.
And last but not least, the reviewer had some thoughts about the career mode dialogue.
Don't tell me it's bad.
Let's just say they found it very cheesy, and they weren't afraid to call it out.
Okay, well, at least they had a sense of humor about it. So overall, it sounds like Planet Coaster 2 is a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, it really is. Tons of potential, but some definite downsides too. So the big question is, what does this all mean for you, the player?
Yeah, that's the key thing, right? Does it live up to the hype?
It really makes you think, right? Like, what kind of park would I build if I didn't have to worry about the management stuff?
Yeah, if you could just go wild with the creative side.
Exactly. Unlimited money, no staff headaches, just pure imagination.
Mm. Maybe that's the real heart of Planet Coaster 2, you know? The sandbox mode.
Yeah, the reviewer definitely made it sound like a blast.
Right. Like, forget the money, forget the objectives. Just build your dream park.
That's a good point. Maybe that's where the real magic happens, when you can just let loose and experiment.
And who knows, maybe focusing on the sandbox mode could actually lead to some interesting discoveries about the game itself.
Yeah, like what?
Like maybe players will figure out ways to make their own challenges, even without the management side being super in-depth.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Or they might find ways to, like, work around those limitations, you know? Get creative with how they build things.
That's the cool thing about games, right? Players always find ways to push the boundaries.
Exactly. And you never know what amazing things people will come up with.
So it sounds like Planet Coaster 2 has a lot to offer, even with those management issues.
Yeah, I'd say so. It might not be for everyone.
Right, if you're really looking for a hardcore management sim.
Yeah, you might be a little disappointed.
But if you're all about that creative freedom, building those crazy, unique parks,
And just having fun with it.
then it sounds like Planet Coaster 2 is definitely worth checking out.
For sure. Ultimately, the best way to know for sure is to try it yourself, right?
Absolutely. Dive in, see what you can create. Maybe you'll build a park that's even better than the ones the developers imagined.
No, that would be something.
So that wraps up our deep dive into Planet Coaster 2. A game with some flaws, for sure, but a whole lot of potential.
And hey, if you do end up building an amazing park, let us know. We'd love to see it.
Yeah. Share your creations, show us what you've got, and let us know what other games you'd like us to take a deep dive into.
The world of gaming is huge. Always something new to explore.
Exactly. So until next time, happy gaming, everyone.